This is Dan Gonzalez and Joey Adams from Cakewalk. We're here today on Cakewalk on CakeTalk episode 2, talking about routing inside of SONAR X3 and SONAR Platinum. If you guys tuned in last week, you noticed that myself, Dan, was running SONAR X3 on my end, and Joey was running SONAR Platinum on his end. That's actually not going to change this week. We're going to go through some really interesting ways that SONAR has improved the routing around the actual program and kind of show how that reflects and can be beneficial to your tracking or your mixing needs. So Joey, inside of SONAR Platinum, currently you have set up a guitar to play for everybody at home, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, unfortunately for the viewers, that is true. I do have a guitar.
Don't be so hard on yourself. I know you can rock out. That's how we met. You were dressed up for a KISS concert and basically going there right after the session I hired you for. And then 3 years later, we became good friends and roommates.
This is how it happened.
Awesome. So inside of SONAR Platinum, we were talking about this concept of flexibility that you have in the studio that maybe you didn't have inside of SONAR X3. Let's take a very, very basic thing that a lot of guys do when they're tracking guitar, which is tracking DI and tracking the amp sound simultaneously. If you notice inside of SONAR X3 on my end, let's say I have a guitar track set up, right? I've got my guitar. I'll call it guitar DI, GTR DI, easy. Turn that on. Whoops. Turn that on. And then I drop in my, my amp effects right here, right? We'll call it TH2 Sonar. That opens up. I've got my guitar tone, right? And that's it. There's no other way to essentially track this tone. You can't actually take this tone and track it in real time. So if I were to play my guitar right now, I would only track DI guitar. And then if I had to transfer to another computer, I'd have to make sure that TH2 had the same presets, or I'd have to render it in real time. And that's a lot of work, right, Joey? Like, that's a ton of work to have to do. Like, in a real studio application, that means that you would have to record the DI only and then set up a whole other day to go into the studio, set up a complex reamping situation, and reamp the guitar and again, right? So
yeah, exactly.
It's just, it's totally doable. Nothing wrong with doing that, but why not just track the amp and the guitar in real time? So Joey, how are we going to do this inside of SONAR Platinum?
Okay, pretty simple actually. First thing is we're going to put in a track.
Yep.
And so this is going to be the guitar DI track. When I hit record, it is going to record guitar DI. Here's my awesome guitar tone. Yeah. So,
awesome.
Sorry, DI. Okay, from there, what I want to do is create a pre-fader send, and this will allow me to monitor the return without listening to the DI.
Yeah. So for those of you at home, Joey, go ahead and select that guitar DI. See how he's got his hand, his little pointer on that post button? The post button allows you to source the send from before or after the fader. That's essentially why we're calling it pre-fader or post-fader. Right now, the send is happening after the actual level of the volume. But if you set it to pre-fader, that little volume slider does not actually affect that send level. So if you turn that off, that's what he meant by pre-fader send. The advantage to this is that you don't have to worry about that level affecting the level that's coming out of the send. So continue.
Exactly. Cool. So now I've got, the guitar DI, and we're going to call this guitar amp.
Yep.
Cool. And you can actually see the send name has changed to guitar amp.
Awesome. It inherits the send. That keeps you nice and organized. Killer.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, we've got this is the new aux track. If I'm, I know it's a new aux track because I developed it, but this is a new aux track. It's different and unique in the sense that we've added a new track icon as well, just so you guys at home know that you're using aux tracks, in your actual SONAR Platinum while you're using it, not just another audio track that's routed differently. So
exactly.
And where do you go from here?
Last thing we have to do is just insert TH2 or whatever your guitar amp modeler of choice. And I'm just going to load up a preset I was playing with earlier I kind of liked.
Awesome.
Mr. George.
Mr. George.
I wonder which George it's named after.
Mr. George Costanza.
Yeah, there you go. Probably. I hope so. So now when I hit record, this guitar DI track, while it's going to be monitoring the amp sound, it's actually going to be only recording the DI sound. And then this guitar amp track is going to be recording the amp sound, after it's been processed through TH2.
Right. So essentially, we could just mute this guitar DI track and just monitor the amp signal, right?
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. So why don't you play a little ditty for us right now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's good enough.
Awesome. How did it feel? Did you feel like a champion?
I mean, I got a Les Paul, so yeah, I feel pretty good.
Awesome. So once you disable the record and the input echo and the mutes on that, and let's just solo the DI and solo the amp, and we'll show these guys at home what exactly is happening. You can go ahead and you can actually turn off that TH2 as well.
Yes, I should do that. So TH2 is off, and I'll jump up to where I actually recorded. I did a little clippy there. Don't worry about that.
Terrible.
I was playing TH2 so
Goodbye.
hard.
See you later. You're done.
Right. So here's the DI.
Very cool.
Yeah, it sounds, awesome.
Like a DI.
Like a DI should. And here is the actual amp sound by itself.
So you essentially recorded 2 very powerful source tracks, and you did it all at the tracking stage. There was no post-production, there was no reamping, there was no rendering. It was all done in real time. And because we have multi-track grouping turned on, you can actually edit these 2 together. So one thing that I typically do with guitar tracks is I'll use the DI track as a guide to edit the actual rhythm tracks. That's why I always like keeping them together.
Transients are more pronounced and stuff like that in the DI, so it's always easier to work with.
Exactly. So at home, Joey, why don't you show them where it is? I believe it's preferences. So P for preferences. Go to project.
We'll go to, I still have it open. Look at that.
Oh, cool. Project record. And then down there at the bottom, multi-track grouping. So by default, it's turned on to do not group tracks. Turn that to group all clips, or if you're using folders, group only clips in folders. So if we were using like a folder, it would record and group everything inside of that folder. But that way at home, when you guys are tracking at home, you can actually edit these things from the get-go. You don't have to worry about them being out of sync when you're editing, and it's really useful for comping because the grouping works across comping. That way there, if you did multiple guitar solos, you have all your DI tracks and all of your amp tracks basically set up right next to one another, ready to go. So yeah, that's kind of how it works, and that's kind of one of the advantages of Sonar Platinum's new routing functionality inside of the 2015 version of the product. Like we were saying before, Sonar X3 doesn't really have this functionality. If you were trying to record some DI tracks inside of Sonar X3, you're limited to just the DI tracks, not the actual amp tracks. You have to go in post-production, reamp the tracks. Maybe you forgot to reamp a track, so the plugin isn't there when you move to another computer. Then you're looking for plugins. It's just a big mess. It's better to have nice, clean audio tracks, and those are really what are going to save you when you have to import tracks to other computers or what have you. Especially when you're working in Sonar, maybe transfer to a buddy who has a different DAW.
One of the things that this is just a personal workflow preference, but it's always been convenient to me to have like all my drums, and then I usually have like a parallel compression track and then a drum bus. Right? It just makes sense to have them in that order.
Okay.
Like a submix. When I say bus, I mean submix. So for those sorts of things, I would like to have those as aux tracks because I can put them in the middle of my track pane, and then the next tracks would be bass or whatever.
I see.
And so the bus pane is still useful for things that are more global in nature. Say I wanted to send all my tracks to a reverb, or some of my tracks to a reverb, but they're not all necessarily from the same group of tracks. They're not in any particular order. So I keep like my send effects in the buses, and I like to keep my aux tracks, my submixes and things like that in my track panes. So I think that flexibility that's been the biggest, workflow enhancement, at least for me personally.
Gotcha. So if we were to apply this to a real life situation, so inside of your tracking, you would essentially you would highlight tracks 2 and 3, right?
Mm-hmm. I can do this now.
Yeah. You'd highlight tracks 2 and 3. And then, if I'm not mistaken, you'd use the fancy quick grouping function and just click new aux track from the output. Is that correct?
Right. So hold down Control to do quick grouping, and then just new aux track. And these tracks are now submixed here in this track that's called submix.
Cool. I would actually call that guitar all, but that's just me.
No, yeah. Just this is examples.
Exactly. So essentially what you have is you have the ability to control, let's say you had, I don't know, let's say you had a guitar DI track, but you had rhythm tracks, lead tracks. You could submix them all down to a single aux track and control all of those instruments with one single fader. And you can do that all within the confines of the actual track view. So for those dudes that are using control surfaces, or those dudes that don't want to reach over to the bus section and really reach for the effects over there, they actually have that control right inside of the interface. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I do the exact same thing now that we have aux tracks in there. I have a instrument group for every single type of instrument. I've got vocal groups, or I should say aux tracks, because it's kind of confusing to say groups and whatever, submixes, but I have a submix. Yeah, exactly. It's a submix. Yeah. Sorry. It's a submix for the kick. I have a submix for the snare. I have a submix for the cymbals. I have a submix for the entire drum set. Submix for guitar groups, vocal groups, background vocals, horns, synths, what have you. And then those are all right there, right next to each set of tracks, right there in the interface for me, because I use control surfaces, so it's a little bit easier for me. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I agree like 1,000,000% with you on that, and that's really helped my workflow a lot too inside of Sonar. So that's wonderful.
Awesome. Yeah.
All right, guys, this is Dan and Joey, and we'll see you guys next week on Cake Talk. See you later.
Bye.